Morning comes too early, hands already warm, working for a better day, trying to keep me warm. Boss man count his tail.
Welcome to Session 3 of our study on the Book of Ecclesiastes. You may be familiar with the modern proverb, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. In chapter 5, Qohelet expands on this idea about when it is the better part of valor to not speak up. He is especially concerned about making vows. He also laments the vulnerability of the oppressed and looks at the role of material things, a concern that he carries on over into chapter 6. He gives us a couple of stories and proverbs that suggest that at times less turns out to be more, portion over profit. We'll be using Robert Alter's translation in this session, so we will hear mere breath a few times instead of vanity that the New Revised Standard Version gives us. But we begin with a prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In this session's readings, we have proverbs and example stories. We notice a shift to the second person singular, a style different from what we have seen so far. We will see some other differences in style and direction. We are told that wealth and prosperity are no guarantee of the quality of life. So we're going to plunge right into chapter 5. As we begin chapter 5, though, we have an anomaly or a structural issue. You may recall that the chapter and verse divisions in the Bible are not original. That is, Qohelet did not break down his writing into chapters and verses. In fact, modern translators have never even seen Qohelet's original writing, nor any of the early copies. The Masoretic text, the authoritative Hebrew text of the Bible, that is our Old Testament, was finished between the 7th and 10th centuries CE, well over 1,000 years after the Book of Ecclesiastes was written. Schools of scribes called Masoretes used ancient manuscripts to standardize the text that has become the primary basis for most Protestant translations of the Old Testament, although the Greek Septuagint is also commonly used along with other sources like the Dead Sea Scrolls. Chapter and verse divisions were first added beginning around the 13th century. Editors of modern versions have to make judgments about following those divisions based largely on literary grounds. Editors of different versions don't always agree on where those divisions should be made. In this particular case, the editors of the NRSV and the editors of the primary Hebrew versions chose different places to split the chapters. This happened in this division between chapter 4 and chapter 5 of the Book of Ecclesiastes. We have said that we are using Robert Alter's translation in this session, and his translation generally tracks the Hebrew Bible. Verse 1 of chapter 5 of the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition is the same as verse 17 or the last verse of chapter 4 of the Hebrew Bible. So if you're looking at the NRSV, for example, for the balance of chapter 5, the verses will be one off. I'm going to begin reading with the last verse, that is verse 17 of chapter 4. Watch your step when you go to the house of God, for understanding is more favored than offering of sacrifice by fools, for they do not know even how to do evil. Here we are urged to be cautious when we go into the house of God. The inference here may be that some people are so stupid that they don't even have the consciousness of doing evil, let alone the mental clarity to do good. Let's move on to verses 1 and 2 of chapter 5. Be not rash with your mouth, and let your heart not hurry to utter a word before God. For God is in the heavens, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. For a dream comes with much business, and the fool's voice with much talk. The reference here is to the pronouncement of vows. God is in the heavens, and you are on earth is a reminder of man's exposure to the all-seeing scrutiny of God on high. Like the sages, Qohelet is keenly aware that one's mouth can get one into trouble. This is a common trope in Egyptian wisdom literature. The recurrence of this theme in wisdom literature has led some to assume that Qohelet's caution of verse 1 refers to speech in general, but it is directed more than that. The context is going to the house of God. The passage treats the specific issue of speech in God's presence. He encourages thought before words. God is a transcendent God, one who is wholly other. Finite humans should beware. Let's go on to verses 3 through 6. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it, for there is no pleasure in fools. What you vow, fulfill. Better that you do not vow than that you vow and do not fulfill. Do not let your mouth make your body offend, nor say before God that it was a mistake. Why should God rage over your voice and ruin your handiwork? For in many dreams are mere breath and much talk. Instead, fear God. Verse 3 said, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it, for there is no pleasure in fools. This basically says that only a fool would make a vow and not fulfill it. And that type of behavior would certainly give no pleasure to God. At the temple, worshipers could vow to make an offering to God, for instance, to request God's aid or to express devotion. Qohelet is simply saying that if you make a vow, you should take it seriously. Not only should you fulfill it, you should do it quickly. If there's a possibility that you might not fulfill it, it's better not to vow at all. You can't later call it a mistake, and sacrifice is no substitute for obedience. A commitment to the powerful God in heaven's binding, and God will see through any subterfuge. Qohelet's concern here seems to be specifically for the distance between the divine and the human. Approach God with due caution. Let's go on to verse 7. If you see the oppression of the poor and the perversion of justice and the right in the province, be not amazed at the matter, for he who is high has a higher one watching him, and still higher ones over them. And the gain of the land is in everything. A king is subject to the field. The author again turns attention to human injustice and exploitation of the poor, but says we shouldn't be surprised. Apparently, the explanation may or may not refer to something like bureaucratic hierarchy, but it's not really clear. Both Alter and Duncan suggest that there may be a translation issues in this passage. Verse 8 says something like, both the economy and political power depend on agriculture. There may be a scribal error in here somewhere. We don't know. So we're going to move on. Verse 9 through the 9th verse of chapter 6 deal with the possibility and limits of human happiness, but framed in the context of money or wealth. The theme is that the pursuit of wealth will not bring happiness. So we're going to read verses 9 through 16 of chapter 5. He who loves money will not be sated with money, and he who loves wealth will have no crop. This too is mere breath. As bounty multiplies, those who consume it multiply. And what is the benefit for its owner except what his eyes see? Sweet is the worker's sleep, whether he eats little or much, and the rich man's surfeit does not let him sleep. There is a blighting evil I have seen under the sun, wealth kept for its owner for his harm, and that wealth is lost in a bad business, and he begets a son with nothing in his hand. As he came out from his mother's womb naked, he will return to go as he came, and nothing will bear off from his toil that he brings in his hand. And this too is a blighting evil. As he came, so he goes, and what gain does he have that he should toil for the wind? All his days too he goes in darkness, with much worry and illness and rage. So we begin with a proverb here. He who loves money will not be sated with money, and he who loves wealth will have no crop. This seems to mean that we really don't know how to control consequences in our lives. But as wealth grows, the one clear benefit seems to be that the owner can see his possessions. Whether he can live to enjoy them is another question. Another proverb in verse 11, sweet is the worker's sleep, whether he eats little or much, and the rich man's surfeit does not let him sleep. So the worker labor gives him the gift of sound sleep. The rich man, on the other hand, worries about his possessions, which keeps him awake. He can't sleep. Verse 12, we read about a blighting of evil, or a sick or a sore evil. In this particular story, a man of wealth loses everything in one business venture. To compound this disaster, he has an heir to whom he now has nothing to bequeath. What compounds this tragedy for this man is that he has been clinging on to his wealth for its own sake. It was an attachment to money for money's sake. So let's go on and read verse 17 through 19, the end of the chapter. Look, I have seen what is good. It is fit to eat and to drink and enjoy good things in all his toil, and that he toils under the sun in the number of days of his life that God gave him, for that is his share. Also the man whom God has given wealth and possessions, and whom he has empowered to enjoy it and bear off his share and delight in his toil. That is God's gift, for not much will he recall the days of his life, for God makes him busy with his heart's delight. So here, Qohelet offers an alternative course to the futile pursuit of profit that ends in anxiety, agitation, and disillusionment. We should enjoy the good things given to us, if that is, we are fortunate enough to have the opportunity to enjoy them. If our economic situation or illness or political disaster or war doesn't intervene, the opportunity to follow a course of simple hedonism is a gift of God. For Qohelet, the time for enjoying the resources at hand is now. The first 9 verses of chapter 6 continue with the same theme. Money won't buy happiness. So let's go on to chapter 6, the first 6 verses. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it is heavy on humankind. A man whom God gives wealth and possessions and honor, and he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires, and God does not grant him to enjoy it, for a stranger will enjoy it. This is mere breath and an evil sickness. If a man begot 100 children and lived many years, and many were the days of his life, he might yet not be sated with good things, and even a burial he might not have. I said, better than he is the stillborn, for in mere breath did it come, and into darkness it goes, and in darkness its name is covered. The very sun did not see or know, more ease for it than for him. And were he to live 1,000 years twice over, yet glad things he did not enjoy. Does not everything go to a single place? In this segment, Qohelet elaborates on the negative counterpart to the positive scenario of divine giving. In the first 2 verses of this chapter, we have a man who has everything. Nothing he might want is beyond his reach. But God does not grant the conditions that allow him to take enjoyment of these things. Rather, a stranger enjoys them. The hypothetical case he presents is a man who lives a long life and has countless descendants. there is a suggestion of an untimely death compounded by the absence of an heir, and the responsibility may be squarely placed with God in this situation. Qohelet uses hyperbole here. Even if a man were to sire scores of children and live many years, his life is tragic if he has not experienced life's enjoyments. Astonishingly, he pronounces a stillborn to be better off than such a person. After listing all the advantages of the aged patriarch in opposition to the man's great longevity, the child has no lifespan at all. Compared to the countless children who will carry on his lineage, the child does not even have a name. We see a man who has the circumstances that bespeak divine blessing, many descendants and a long life, and Qohelet declares that he is no better off than a stillborn. That statement comes from Qohelet's conviction that nothing is more important for humans than the experience of satisfaction and joy in one's day-to-day existence. Nothing can compensate for this lack. Let's go on to verses 7 through 9. All a man's toils for his own mouth, yet his appetite will not be filled. For what advantage has the wise over the fool? What good is it for the poor man to know how to get round among the living? Better what the eyes see than desire going round. This too is a mere breath and hurting the wind. So here we have a series of proverbs that contain ambiguities, in part because of what the Hebrew terms mean or what they don't mean. Verse 8, for example, for what advantage has the wise over the fool? What good is it for the poor man to know how to get round among the living? This may mean that the poor man's competence in dealing with others does him no more good than wisdom does the wise man. That is mere breath or vapor, if that's in fact what those Hebrew words mean. Verse 9, better what the eyes see than desire going round. This may mean that one is better off simply enjoying what one sees than embarking on the dangerous and potentially frustrating path of trying to fulfill one's desire. Again, the Hebrew translation is questionable here. Alter and Duncan both consider this verse problematic, as they're not really sure what it means. McGee doesn't even bother to discuss this verse. Oscar Wilde wrote once, in this world there are only two tragedies. One is not getting what one wants, and the other is getting it. In this observation is the recognition that what people imagine makes for happiness and what in fact does make for happiness can be very different things. Ecclesiastes 5:10 through 6:9 may be seen as an expansion on this insight. Whatever else this passage does, it effectively probes the assumptions people have about what will bring fulfillment. So we're going to move on to the last three verses of the chapter, beginning with chapter 10, verse 10. What was has already been called by name and is known, as he is man and cannot deal with one more powerful than he. For there are many words that increase mere breath. What is the advantage for man? For who knows what is good for man in life, in his days of mere breath? For he spends them like a shadow. Who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? These verses dwell on the limitations of humans. God is never explicitly named here, yet the divine power is ubiquitous in these verses. The passive verbs named and known refer to what God has named and what God knows. Qohelet goes on to say that humans cannot dispute with God, who is so much stronger than they are. Speech, the capacity that distinguishes humans from all other creatures, becomes a devalued currency here. So much air when we are conversing with God. The pair of concluding questions, who knows what will be good for man in life? And who can tell them what will be after them? The who here is rhetorical. It means, of course, no one. We have a stark contrast here. The one who could give crucial knowledge, if so inclined, the all-encompassing divine power and knowledge on the one hand and limited human capacities on the other. God versus man. Qohelet is a wisdom writer who constantly questions the value of wisdom. He knows that a human life is likely to be bleak, that is intrinsically unpredictable, may end badly, and will surely be blotted out by death. His wisdom is to register this perception, but apart from his occasional exhortation to enjoy, he does not presume to know what is good for man, unlike the purveyors of the mainline wisdom literature. In our next session, we'll read chapters 7 and 8. We'll take a look at the elusiveness of wisdom and revisit injustice. I hope you can join us for our discussion on Monday evening. If you have not already done so, you can send an email to online.classes@northgateumc.org to get the Zoom link. Meanwhile, have a good week.
People talk about difference, but I just see the same. Every heart need kindness, every soul need a name, and we're deep. Children laughing somewhere, sounds of better days. Keep the light inside you, don't let the darkness stay. So sing a song for mercy, sing it clear and kind. We all walk this same good earth, just trying to ease our mind.